is the Athletic Football Show.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me tonight is my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
Good. I thought we were going to be like cracking some Kevin White jokes, Marco Wilson with the swan dive into the end zone, and all of a sudden just a bomb, a shell-shocking trade that to end the night and lead us right into it. It was a good lead into the show.
Fantastic timing. Typically, it's when we stop recording that stuff like this happens. Thankfully, it happened right before we started recording. Christian McCaffrey traded to the San Francisco 49ers. My understanding, the bulk of the trade compensation coming in the 2023 draft. The way I saw it, it's a second round pick, a third round pick,
third, fourth in 2023,
and a fourth in the 2023 draft for Christian McCaffrey. So immediately, before we get into compensation, Niners team building and running back accrual strategies, immediate reaction to how Christian McCaffrey fits in San Francisco.
Oh, it's awesome. It's gonna be fun. It's just Swiss Army knives galore. Just every position, you do everything: punt, pass, kick, catch. A lot of Booby Miles kind of guys. Like that's what they'll build the whole offense out of it. But when you take a step back, you kind of realize the weight of this move and everything else that's happened in the macro sense. But just in a like schematic enjoyment of football, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be super cool. But yeah, there's other questions that go into this move.
I'm so fascinated by how they're going to use those guys all together.
Yeah.
I mean, you think back on it, the last time I can remember Shanahan having a running back with this sort of receiving skill set in the moment was probably when he had Tevin Coleman in Atlanta. Remember when they were like lining Tevin Coleman up in the slot and they were putting him at receiver all the time. Yeah. And they really haven't had that guy in San Francisco. I assume they thought Jerick McKinnon could do some of that stuff for him when they signed him way back when, but he was hurt for the majority of the time he was on the team. So they've really just been trying to piece together that running back spot with a guy who could simply run the ball semi-effectively. So they really haven't been experimenting with the guys who are nominally running backs. They've experimenting with the guys who are nominally receivers who they put at running back. So what it looks like going the other direction, I'm curious what that could be in practice.
That's a great call with the Tevin Coleman stuff, because that was some fun stuff. Like the game I remember vividly in that 2016 season was they played the Broncos and they were getting into like 3 tight end looks with that, like going empty, and Tevin Coleman was just running slants on people against linebackers, and it was awesome.
It brings us back to this conversation that we were having earlier today, how back then in like 2016, if you motioned Tevin Coleman out into the slot, like it would break people's brains. You could get every single bit of information you wanted to from a defense. So now we have Christian McCaffrey on the Niners, a Niners team that I think still figuring out the interior of their offensive line. If we're being kind, Trent Williams has been hurt a little bit. So I don't think we've come to understand what the 2022 Niners offense really can be. And now you're throwing Christian McCaffrey into that mix.
Yeah.
I think it's worth exploring how responsible this is and what this says about the timeline that the Niners are on. The Niners just gave up more or less what the Rams gave up last year to trade for Von Miller. Okay? Second round pick and a third round pick, plus a little bit more. McCaffrey's still under contract. He could still be there next year. The Rams made that move because in their minds, we're all in, baby. Like we're a Von Miller and OBJ away from potentially taking this thing over the top. And guess what? It happened. They won the Super Bowl in part because of what Von Miller was for them in the playoffs. Are the Niners so close to this thing? They're like, all right, if we get Christian McCaffrey, like this is it. This is the move that's going to take us over the top. I don't want to dampen the enthusiasm about this too much because it is inherently fun, but I'm just a little bit confused, a little bit perplexed, like from the outside looking in, like, what does this mean? Like, what do you think you are if you're going out to make a move like this? Because that's hard for me to pin down.
You would think they'd be gun shy a little bit after, they traded everything for Trey Lance. I mean, they don't even have a first round pick this year as well because of that. But also, the injuries, the rash of injuries their team has had this year, you think they'd be like a little gun shy. Like the Rams were having some good injury luck last year, like more or less. And it's like, oh, okay, this might be our year. We got to strike while the iron's hot right now. So I don't know. I feel like they just like, they double down and triple down on what they are. And they're just like, yeah, this is fun. Screw it. Let's do it. We even talked about on our show earlier. I mentioned how sometimes and actually with the Rams, how skill guys can overcome O-line woes. So I think he's just saying, juice everybody up. Let's just get all these guys, super serum soldiers on the outside, and then we'll just figure out, we'll mosh our offensive line together and I'll scheme it up. I'm very curious. Like, it's not responsible whatsoever. This is so much draft capital for running backs over and over and over. And I'm all about like drafting a running back a year, but it's like day 3 picks. These are third rounders he's given up over the years, and now he's given up more, but I don't know. I'm back and forth because I'm excited in 2 weeks to be going like, hey, did you see how they use CMC with Debo? Like, do you see like all those motions? And
on that level, of course it's going to be fun. But you look at it, and I just said maybe part of the compensation and part of the thinking is that McCaffrey is under contract next year. He has an $11.8 million base salary next season.
Next 2 years. Yeah.
So they have this rookie quarterback contract theoretically that they can kind of wield, but wielding it for a $12 million running back on top of the other extensions that they've handed out, we can argue whether that's a prudent decision. So you get back to what you just said about what they've spent on running backs. Let's go on a journey together. Okay.
Oh, man.
2017, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch get to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
They must trade up in the 4th round for Joe Williams. It must happen after they gave McKinnon that contract.
Yes.
So they must do it. Joe Williams fizzles out. They pick him in the 4th round. They trade a 5th round pick to go up to get him. Okay. Yeah. We can continue this game. The Joe Williams things happen. Joe Williams things happens. We talked about the McKinnon contract. They went out and they got Tevin Coleman at some point. They had all these guys that were undrafted, back of the roster guys that were crushing it for them, like Raheem Mostert. In last year's draft, they trade up in the 3rd round and give away a future 4th round pick to draft Trey Sermon.
Yep.
Who is no longer on the roster.
Who got outplayed by a 6th rounder immediately.
And then this year, they drafted Tyria Davis-Price in the 3rd round, and now they're trading 3 more draft picks next year to go get Christian McCaffrey. So if you add all this up, it's a 3rd and a 4th for Sermon, who doesn't play. It's a 3rd for Tyria Davis-Price, who they clearly don't think is going to be in the mix for them anymore. And then it's 3 picks for Christian McCaffrey. So now you're talking about like half a dozen day 2 picks to build your running back room, and then this is what you're left with. Again, it's going to be enjoyable in practice when we watch it, but we got to take the nuclear codes away from Kyle when it comes to the running backs here.
That's exactly it. And it's the irony of it, or I guess, of course, this happened, is that the other team in on this, or trying to get on this trade, was the Rams. And
that makes a little bit more sense. They're already so far gone, it doesn't matter
anymore. But it's so funny. It's like, again, you guys, like, what's with you guys and running backs and like skill guys? It's like, I don't know if they who they go after. They have a type. These guys fall apart as soon as they touch them. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just funny that these 2 teams, Shanahan and McVay, are just like, oh yeah, another 2nd round running back. Oh no, we got to get a 2nd, 3rd round running back. That's what we give. It's not a 1st rounder. We're okay. But 2nd and 3rds, we just got to keep spending these top 100 picks on these guys. And it's just funny that they can't stick the landing ever because of just one reason or another.
Slightly arguable that the Niners did have a little bit more ammo to work with some of these moves. Over the last 2 years, they got a pair of 3rd round picks for the Robert Saleh hiring from the Jets. And then they got another 3rd round pick because Martin Mayhew was one of their executives, got hired as the GM of the Washington team. And they got 2 picks for Mike McDaniel, getting hired by the Dolphins. So even though they've traded away their picks that they own in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round this year, they do have 2 back of the 3rd round picks. Yeah. This is very Rams-like. The Rams are also stumbling into these comp picks because that's how they try to justify it and build this thing. And that is where the Niners are now. But this is like what I would do in fantasy football. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, I got a random 2nd rounder by trading away Matthew Stafford 2 years ago. Sure. It's free money. But I don't think that's how an NFL team should probably operate with their resources.
But when you list off the picks one after one, I just keep getting the picture of when Ricky Williams, the Saints traded for Ricky Williams in the draft. And they just list off all the picks. I think they traded with Washington. It's just all the picks that New Orleans traded for Ricky Williams to move up. It was like their entire draft and next year's first rounder. That's what like was going through my head, like just like boop, 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 boop. Like every pick you're listing, every player they're drafted. That's what I was picturing, was that type of like ESPN draft graphic. So it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, because I just don't like, I can never do that. Like it's just proven that this is not the way to do it. And you would think that, yes, they're getting these defensive guys and they're getting guys that are stepping up that are later round picks. And I mean, DeMondre Lenore, and like, who's a third day 3 pick, is starting at nickel corner, and they're like hitting on these picks, but it's just such a hard way to live, because
that's an argument for why you should want more of them.
Yes. It's just a sunk cost. Like, or just like, you're just giving yourself a little more ammo, just room for error. That's what you're giving yourself. So it's just, you're narrowing.
A fifth rounder can turn into Hufanga. When that's happening so often, you want more of those bites of the apple.
Don't you think they want O-line depth? Like, just maybe a couple more bodies that aren't undrafted scrap heap types of guys. And it's like, I get it. You want to trust yourself as a schemer and a game planner, but it's like, why do you always want to try and play in expert mode? Like, there's better ways to accumulate and move this. And you would think after the Trey Lance move and an injury, like I said, that they would be a little gun shy, but it's like, no, they're just doubling down. They're saying, we'll figure it out at one point.
Speaking of Trey Lance, that's another thing that I'm taking away from this. Now, the onus on Trey Lance next year becomes immense.
Yes.
Like, with you don't have any of these picks. Nothing. So for you to take the next step, it is all on the quarterback that you made this move for. And we have seen him start 4 NFL games.
Yeah.
Like, it's
like 5.
They're trying to thread a needle. And
yeah.
who knows, if I would have to assume that there's a very good chance D'Amico Ryans is not the head coach there.
Right.
Or is not the defensive coordinator there next season. So now, like, can you count on this sort of defensive excellence that you've had over the last few years? Right. Like, I mean, I like a lot of elements of this team, but I do think that putting it on expert mode is a great way to put it. Like, they have definitely upped the degree of difficulty here with some of the decisions that they've made.
Like you said, the pressure on Trey Lance already felt, because this defense was so good. You can kind of feel it on him to like, hey, you have to perform and not screw this whole thing up. And I mean, now it's just, I get it. The NFC is down. It's not a great conference, this year. And like,
we watched the Saints-Cardinals tonight.
Right. And so now it's okay. I can maybe say that it's like, hey, this is our chance to really like push. Hey, it's a 1-game season. Once we get into the playoffs, like, this gives us a chance, I guess. But you got to pay up at some point. The Bills do at some point, or you just get bit in the ass in the other ways. I mean, we just talked about today with the Rams, and it's like, you thread the needle, and yes, you stuck the landing last year, but then it wears you down over time, just because you just don't have that leeway that you would want. I mean, yes, this is all kind of obvious arguments, but it's still like worth saying. This is the trade-off, literally, of what you're doing right here.
If you're trying to spin this if you're trying to justify, if you're trying to rationalize, if you're the Niners, I do think that point about the NFC is how you could potentially get there. Yeah. Like, they're getting a lot of these guys back. We talked about it earlier today. They're getting Bosa back. They're getting Trent Williams back. Mm-hmm. They're getting Jason Verrett back. We'll see how long Charvarius Ward is out.
Jimmy Ward
is going to be back. And so most of these guys, McGlinchey, hopefully he gets back relatively soon. There's a chance that they're pretty close to full strength, or whatever their version of full strength is, over the next 2 weeks. And you could be looking at the rest of the NFC and just say, if we get 1 or 2 more pieces of Christian McCaffrey, why can't we be the second best team in the NFC with how everything else is shaken out? I think that's a very, very dangerous way to approach this stuff. The Rams did it. The Rams walked that tightrope all the way to a Lombardi trophy, but that's really hard to pull off. It's so hard. Those rationalizations typically don't work out, because winning Super Bowls is really difficult.
It's like a couple times I could think of these kind of quasi all-star teams was actually like the Dion 49ers when he came there for 1 year. And then also but that was a signing and everything. But then I'm trying to just think, and then the Rams, last year, it's just that it's hard. Like, the Bucs are homegrown, and that's with the Brady stuff, and he's free agent, all that. I'm just trying to think these kind of new nucleuses of teams, nuclei. But that's what this is. A nucleus or nuclei.
I think nuclei sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Not a science guy. Nuclei sounds right.
True. But English language you help out with. But no, but that's what this team, like, I'm like, I don't want to dog it too much because it's just, I do want to dog it, but I don't want to dog it too much because I'm just so excited to watch it again. I know that's terrible to say, but I just want to see what he does. He doesn't really, we haven't seen Shanahan with too much of these high pedigree running backs that aren't his anointed high pedigree running backs that he takes in the third round, but actual guys that we know can be stars. Actually, can we talk about like maybe with the Panther side for a sec? Like this is awesome for them. Like,
oh my God. This is
best
case scenario.
Yeah.
Best case scenario to get 3 draft.
Oh,
yes. I mean, this
awesome
is a team that traded away a pick to go get Matt Corral. So they're already low on draft capital. It's just time. If you're the Panthers here, you're probably sitting there. You're looking at what next season could be with McCaffrey. So $19.5 million cap hit for Christian McCaffrey next year if you're the Carolina Panthers. Yep. And trading him, I think, we'll see what kind of dead money they're looking at. I think it's something around like 15 million. They restructured him. So it's a decent chunk, but they're still looking at
they save $1 million next year.
they save $1 million next year. So they save $1 million and they get 3 draft picks. So that's not a bad outcome for Carolina because I can understand if you're looking at the DJ Moore contract and he's a 25-year-old wide receiver and you'd already paid out the signing bonus. Okay, we want that. We want that guy as part of this. Brian Burns is a 25-year-old pass rusher with 1 year left on his deal. I don't think you should fire sale this thing because there is an argument to be made about creating a soft landing spot for whoever you hire as your head coach. But McCaffrey is going to be 27 next year. He's had a lot of trouble staying healthy, and he's really, really expensive. So I absolutely think this is a good chance for Carolina to potentially kickstart this thing. If they have the first overall pick next year, which they absolutely could, and you have an extra second, an extra third, an extra fourth, and you have what I think are some pieces in place, right? Like DJ Moore is a nice player in the right circumstances. We'll see what Aquanu can be over time. Moton has been a good right tackle for them in stages. They are not as bad as some of these other teams that stumble into the first overall pick. They've paid for it. They don't have as much financial flexibility as some other teams that bottom out. But I also think that this thing could get microwaved pretty fast if they get name your number 1 overall pick quarterback, the right head coach, and you get some of these other draft picks, then you can start building this thing with. I totally agree.
Absolutely. Because like with Burns, if they could figure that out, I mean, you already have a true Pro Bowl pass rusher, which is, what you want to get. That's one of the building blocks usual teams want to get. But I think just that DJ Moore point is you and I have talked sometimes about like, even I think it was with the Falcons mostly. And we're talking about just dropping a young quarterback into just such a bad situation. Like with the
perfect
Bears.
Example.
And now it's okay. At least he has a weapon. At least he has some pedigree on his offensive line. It's not just, it's just like, hey, go make us some plays out there. Now he has something to lean on where it's not just all him. I'm just the hypothetical because probably odds are they're taking one of these quarterbacks. Like it's stars are aligning if it worked out that way. So having a guy that he can lean on at those times, him being whatever quarterback they take, that helps so much. And it also just makes it attractive for head coaches and GMs. This stuff has become recruiting for these guys. So, it's from owners and just making sure if they, whatever they do with the GM, but for a head coach, it's, hey, this is what we got. You got all this draft capital. We can go get your guy, your hand-picked quarterback, and you can just start from scratch with this. There's no one getting washed onto you, and you're going like, well, I got to coach this guy up. So I think that also just helps out too with their argument and just what their next step is as a franchise.
It's so depressing to look at some of the other situations around the league that aren't the Bears. Like even the Giants, Andrew Thomas is legit.
Yeah.
Like Andrew Thomas is a star level left tackle. They draft Evan Neal in the top. I can never remember who was picked where. Top 7? He was 7th pick, right?
7. I always go
and
top 10.
And then Thibodeau was top 10.
Away. Yeah.
So you get 2 top 10 tackles. And even if your wide receiving core is not full of NFL players right now, whoever you drop in at quarterback next year, potentially, they have 2 top 10 tackles and 1 elite left tackle. The Falcons have Jake Matthews, who is a serviceable NFL left tackle. They have 2 top 10 picks at the receiving positions for whoever plays quarterback for them.
Lindstrom.
They have Chris Lindstrom is there.
Amazing. Yep.
McGarry we'll see what happens. They, obviously they took away his 5th-year option, but if they,
I gave him such backhanded compliments in my article because I gave him one of the most approved tabs, and I was just like, he went from not even making a roster to he's fine. Like, but that's so
but an offensive tackle. That's what you want, man. So
Yeah.
you have all these teams that were supposed to be rebuilding and supposed to be tearing it down, and they're all more hospitable places for a quarterback than what's happening in my hometown here.
Oh no. I mean, that's the path. And like you guys look at the Bears, it's like we got cap space and we got all our draft picks. And then that's what you're
All those
on.
left tackles that become available in free agency, go spend on one of those.
Yeah. Or
all right.
Even the good ones are banged up, and that's why they're on free agency, like Armstead. It's like
speaking of Teron Armstead, and speaking of teams that are giving away draft picks, it's a tough night to be a Saints fan, my friend.
Yeah. It was rough.
This is one of those moments. Chris Olave is very good, but even we could talk about Chris Olave, and we could talk about Chris Olave as it relates to the larger Saints team building philosophy.
Right.
Chris Olave as a first round pick is great. They gave up 2 more additional mid round picks to move up and get Chris Olave. So even if Chris Olave is good, you have paid a premium to acquire Chris Olave. Chris Olave's bar that he has to clear to justify the move you made for him is already 3 notches above what it would typically be for the 11th overall pick. This team does this all the time. Seth Galina tweeted out the saddest kind of synopsis of this. The way that this all worked with all of the draft picks that changed hands with the Saints and the Eagles before this year's draft, the end point of this, if the Saints pick like 4th overall, is that the Saints essentially use the 4th overall pick in the 2023 draft plus a 2024 second rounder on Trevor Penning.
Yeah.
That's how this ends.
Yep.
Plus the moves that they made to go up and get Chris Olave. And I know that the Saints are hurt. Okay. I know that Chris Harris Jr. and Justin Evans are having to deal with DeAndre Hopkins tonight. I know that Throckmorton is playing left guard. I know that it's Marquez Callaway dropping passes that lead to pick sixes, and Kevin White having to catch passes, and Jawan Johnson is out there because even Adam Troutman is hurt. Like that's where we are right now. But guess what? That can always happen. Yeah. When you're trading away future first-round picks, this eventuality where the bottom falls out can always happen. Because even on defense, I know all the corners are hurt, but not everyone is hurt. And the step back they've taken on defense combined with the rash of injuries, that's how you get this team that is just like, oh man, like there is absolutely a world where we go 6-11 and we hand over the 3rd overall pick in this draft to Philadelphia. And when you're having a rough season and draft quarterbacks. So let's just say, I don't know, whatever. There's so many different hypotheticals between now and then, but let's say Will Anderson is 3rd overall pick, and you have the 3rd overall pick, and he's supposed to be this generational pass rusher, and you have 33-year-old Cam Jordan who had 12 pressures coming into this game. I know he has 5 sacks. He, on a per snap basis, he is not the same guy he was a couple years ago. No. And that's okay because that happens. When you have guys in their 30s, that's what's going to happen. When you swap out Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May for elite players like a Marcus Williams, and you're looking at what's happening in your defense, this is the 18th ranked defense by DVOA. There are corner injuries, but that deterioration plus the chance that's always there for you just have the season from hell, that is where the Saints are left right now. And it's not like they came into the season with an elite quarterback. They came into the season with Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. And
the idea of Jameis Winston.
The idea, that's exactly right. Because the rumors rumbling today before this game are that Andy Dalton could keep the job if he kept playing the way that he was. So it's just a rough situation right now. Like maybe they recoup some draft capital by trading Sean Payton, and we'll see what that ends up looking like. But this team really pushed their chips into the middle of the table here in a season where I don't know if it was justified. And I was always worried about what it might look like. And I think that those concerns are well-founded if you look at what's happening right now.
And it's also, this is why we say, you accumulate bullets and everything is, yes, they have had drafts where they hit on a lot of guys, especially when they make these aggressive moves. But it's like, what if you don't? Like, what if that bet is wrong? Okay, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Then it's like, okay, well, we'll trade these next picks to move up and we'll get our next guy. But if you're wrong once or twice out of 5 times, it's devastating. You have to be, you have to hit on these guys. Like Olave, like I'm glad you brought it up too, but it's like, yes, Olave did hit, but that just kind of read paperclip of all this, like right now they're projected with the 4th pick, and I just wrote up on these 2023 QB prospects, and whatever you think of Levis, there's 3 guys though. Like, so if you have the 4th pick, you're getting one of those 3 guys.
Who are the 3 guys? Bryce Young, CJ Stroud,
Bryce and Will Levis, and that's the controversial one.
Okay, you're counting Levis as the 3rd guy. Okay,
I'm counting him. Yeah, just kind of
gotcha.
what the talk is. I consider
that's fine.
Yeah, no, but that's 3 guys right there, and then plus Will Anderson. Okay, and if you have the 4th pick, you're kind of like you're spinning the wheel right there. I'm just kind of like that's how it plays out, depending however you want to go about it. Like and again, that's also how you consider Levis and yada yada yada. But yes, it's all hypotheticals, but it gives you more ways to pivot. They were another team trying to walk that fine line, and this is what happens when it goes wrong multiple times in a row as you try to do it. It's like it's so hard to do this right. And sometimes, yes, you do hit and you're the Rams, but there's more often than not, it fails and blows up in your face. Not always when you're giving up a top 5 pick. Like this, the closest thing this reminds me of is the RG3 trade. And they ended up having to give up all these top picks. And I mean, Washington's Washington, but still it's
the number 2 pick in the draft next year.
Yep. And it'd be devastating because it's just, and that RG3 got hurt, yada, yada. That's a whole nother sliding door moment. But that is what can happen. Stuff can happen. Just like you were just saying, stuff can happen. RG3 can get hurt, and this is what happens. And then it just devastates your team, and it feels like there's just a huge crater there that's hard to crawl out of.
Trying to think of who that pick was in the
2000.
It was the 2014 draft, because 2013 is the year that Washington bottomed out.
Greg Robinson, I think.
Yeah, that was Greg Robinson was the 2014 draft.
Aaron Donald,
because they went to the playoffs in 2012. Yes.
Yeah.
So it was Greg Robinson with the 2nd overall pick in the 2014 draft. And that's another one negative example. The other one that reminds me of more recently, the Texans in 2017 when Deshaun got hurt. And so then they just bottom out and they hand the 4th overall pick to Cleveland and they draft Denzel Ward. And that's just why it's really dangerous to trade away future 1st-round picks. And even when they're healthy, like corner, I know they're devastated at corner, and you got Alontae Taylor playing with, and even Bradley Roby goes out today.
But even healthy, we were thinking 10-7 was a good year for them.
Yes,
like that's what's great. Their ceiling wasn't that high. That's what the Rams ceiling was. Oh yeah, we're a Super Bowl contender. Their ceiling was make the playoffs and feel good about ourselves. Like that's
I'd say it's a really, really good point. Yeah. The one thing I will say, and watching, I know that they have no corners, but even over the last few games, when Lattimore was healthy and they were healthier, just how not intimidating they felt in man coverage anymore. That was the biggest difference to me. And the numbers bear that out. I think they're 24th in the NFL right now in EPA allowed per drop back in man coverage, which again, a million caveats with injuries, but for the last 3 years, they were top 10. And you think about the players they had to do that. Jenkins was a tight end eraser. The way that Williams could just play in the post, and he was just so incredibly good, and it had a very specific role. The way that the CGJ could just bully people in the slot, and what Lattimore is, and they've lost that edge. And their interior defensive line play is just not very good right now, and they're all a year older, and it's just that like the real intimidating kind of devastating potential of that defense. Yes, creaky is a great way to put it. That like creaky. We are going to that like we're gonna fuck you up like element to who they used to be. It just doesn't feel like they have that anymore, even when those guys are on the field. And if you're gonna lose that, we've talked about this. That component was necessary to the vision that they were trying to instill for 2022. That defense needed to be that defense to justify all the other moves they made. And it's always a real risk to talk yourself into that sort of defensive sustained success, because it just doesn't happen very often, especially when you're trading out some of the component parts and arguably some of the most important component parts.
Yes. And this, when they made the first trade, I remember I think we were on a show, we did a show, and we were just kind of like, but why? This has to be for a quarterback, because you wouldn't do this for anything else. Like that's what it was, so aggressive. It was cherry on top moves. It was, as opposed to like, oh no, we got to rebuild this Sunday that we have in New Orleans. Like it's and like just also like look at your quarterbacks. Like you're optimistic about what Jameis did in a small sample size. Okay, that's fine. But then even with Penning hits, you're counting on a rookie left tackle and a rookie receiver to be our main juice, like rookies. rookies can be very promising. Not all of them do what Jamar Chase did last year, where he just took over games. They can still be good, very good players, which Chris Olave apparently is. I mean, let's just call it. But it's also one of those things where it's like, okay, you have that. Now what? Like, you still have to like do all the other things and hit.
And I know Michael Thomas is hurt, but like Michael Thomas has been hurt for 2 years.
Yeah,
this is all stuff that
on the maybes.
Yes. And that they were counting on a lot of maybes, and this is where it's left them. And I know like tonight isn't nearly as bad as the final score indicates. It's a drop ball interception that gets taken back. If Callaway catches that corner out the play before Isaiah Simmons picks that off, or if Dalton doesn't get hit as he throws that ball, it's not as terrible of a throw if you go back and you watch it. Simmons had his eyes on the tight end that was getting pulled down by it, and Dalton had Olave. If that ball has a little bit more zip on it because he doesn't get hit, that ball is probably complete.
He's going to the right spot. It was all going to the right spot. Yeah.
So that the game starts to unravel at that point. Yeah. But that's kind of the story of their season, is that this is one of those seasons from hell. This is one of those seasons when everything unravels.
Right. Dennis Allen at halftime, he first tried to give the coach speak, and then he started going through each interception. And he was like, it's not that bad. It wasn't that bad. But then he was like, the first one, and then he was like, the second one, and then he was like, the third one was pretty rough. And then like he slowly, like, his wheels started like turning, like, oh man, I tried to black it out, but that was rough. I thought that killed me. Like that, I thought that was the funniest thing. The other thing was the Antonio Hamilton interception. Herb Street went quiet because Hamilton went to South Carolina State, so he didn't have any tidbits about what college he went to. So that was my other highlight of the night. I don't have many notes on this game, but that was one of my notes. Oh, DeAndre Hopkins lining up everywhere. That was
so. We'll
cool.
talk about. I want to talk about that in a second. The last Herb Street thing I have. The first possession, he's like, "Oh yeah, Ryan Ramczyk and JJ Watt. They're very familiar with each other." Ryan Ramczyk arrived in Madison 5 years after JJ Watt's last season at Wisconsin. 5 years. Maybe they've met each other on the sideline at a game.
He brought
somewhere
up the
along
Wisconsin
the way.
TCU 2010 Rose Bowl, January 2011 Rose Bowl. I was like, they're very familiar with each other. And he brought up the Rose Bowl, not when JJ picked him off in the playoffs. If you remember that game, remember the Cincinnati-Houston playoff game? It was like JJ's rookie year. I think he like tipped the ball.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't bring up that, but brought up the Rose Bowl. That was earlier than that.
JJ, that story, after JJ made that play, like that's when he kind of felt like, all right, like I'm here. I remember him telling me that story. Like went to, I don't know why I'm going on this tangent, but they went to like awesome. Galveston. They went to Galveston to go to the beach, like right after that. And like people were like coming up to him at the beach, and he was just like, "Oh, I guess this is like what it means to like be an NFL player who's like done something." Yeah. So I got a lot of JJ Watt stories over the last 10 years or so, but JJ Watt is an aging player now on the Arizona Cardinals, who I don't know. I guess they're still in the mix in the NFC.
I guess
like
everybody's in the mix.
My main takeaway from today is two things about the Arizona Cardinals. I guess there's a few. One. When DeAndre Hopkins is in the game, DeAndre Hopkins is the focal point of their passing game. Like the passing game is built around DeAndre Hopkins. The fact that he could do anything he wanted today against the Justin Evans or this version of Chris Harris in 2022, who was signed 2 weeks ago to the active roster, I think it was October 4th. That shouldn't be all that surprising. Like that's what they did today. It was essentially just threatening vertical and then him catching comebacks or contested catches down the sideline because the Saints didn't have NFL corners. But it still is nice to have that option within your passing game because they didn't before that.
We talk about easy buttons, and that's what having a true X receiver, that's what an easy button is. It's just throw back shoulder fades to this dude and line him up everywhere.
There was one play where they motioned him into a stack.
Yes.
They played with a number count and they ran a little, I guess it was a little fade, but they play with the number count. The slot corner's on him. He had inside leverage. So it's like, all right, now I got a really easy completion. Just, baby steps. Good stuff.
Just lining up on the right side, like on both sides. That was a step enough. Yeah, but I saw some slot snaps. Like they had little inside hitches for him. Yeah, they moved him around. It was welcome to 2022 NFL offense, Cliff Kingsbury. It's helping out your best player.
The other guy that I thought looked very good in the touches that he got was Eno Benjamin, who
great. I love you
again. If we want to start talking about team building strategy again,
yeah,
Eno Benjamin would have been free this year I think Eno Benjamin has probably been more effective in his touches in the backfield than James Conner was when James Conner was healthy. And so, again, we would talk about your resources and where you're spending them and all that stuff is a whole different conversation. I don't know how to feel about the Cardinals moving forward. I think, again, we talk about Saints defense that didn't have any workable NFL level corners for most of this game. A Saints pass rush that has been one of the most toothless in the NFL when they've brought 4, and an Arizona Cardinals offensive line that I think struggles against really good fronts did not play one tonight, this version of the Saints. So I don't know what this means or foretells for the future of the Cardinals in 2022 and where they stand, but it does make me very concerned about the state of the Saints.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is just, like you said, it's the worst possible timeline. Like everything, nothing's hit. Like just everything is, other than Olave, but it's just like every move that they made this past, really post Breeze, is really just each one's kind of like blown up a little bit. There's that gif of like that little mascot running through a minefield and everything's just blowing up around.
Yes,
like that's what the Saints feel like right now. It's just that little mascot running through a minefield.
It's exactly what they feel like right now. You Zach Allen made a couple plays tonight. He's somebody else that you like. Yes,
he's shown up statistically. As far as when I've just done some like little research on True Media, and I kind of just noticed him like making plays. It was the Eagles game is when he kind of like stood out to me. I was watching that game a ton and watched that on all 22. But yeah, Zach Allen's a good little player. Like he's a good starter, which for a team that doesn't really draft and develop all too well, especially with their day 2 picks, it's a big win for the Cardinals. But yeah, good player.
I would like to go back and watch some of it on the all 22. I was watching the next gen cast, but not getting a ton of great angles of the running game. Yeah. They did some interesting stuff in the running game. Like at one point they pulled DJ Humphries around on that big run. I was like, ooh, that's pretty nice. And they're doing it with some backup interior offensive linemen. So, and the Cardinals are a team that they potentially could do a lot of damage in the running game because they get the lightest boxes in the league.
Yep.
So if they can get half decent production or from the creativity of their run game and the way it's constructed and backs getting a lot of the meat that's on the bone, they should have a productive running game. So I think that tonight was a step in the right direction with that.
It's always the irony with their offense is that you think it's going to be these cool passing concepts and they do some creative stuff once in a while, but it's just the run game's awesome. Like the run game's like just fun, like because they're willing to do funky stuff. They had a game where they ran the speed option 4 times. Like that, okay, great.
I didn't love that the same way that you did, but
I loved it because I couldn't believe I saw a team run it more than once in a game. I've seen teams do it in like 3rd and 1 in the red zone, like the Chiefs did against the Bucs. Like, okay, nice little change up. I've never seen a team just go, we're doing it every 3rd down. But then this is the trade up. This is also like talking out both sides of your mouth with the Cardinals. Then they had Hollywood Brown trying to block Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey gave him like a rock bottom, and it just like tackled the running back for like a 2-yard gain.
How about the fade to Rondale Moore?
Oh my God. Even my wife watched all Thursday night games. She kind of usually doesn't watch with me. Monday night, I've gotten her on Monday night because she enjoys in a morbid way. She likes watching Chris Berman's Fastest 3 Minutes. Like she thinks she has no idea who he is. So her introduction's been this past month, and that's been a highlight. But the Thursday night game, she watched this one with me because the Taylor Swift announcement in the 3rd quarter.
And Look at that. NFL marketing never
worked.
Undefeated.
It worked. It actually worked. So she was watching this Cardinals offense and she goes, are they really small? And I go, well, yeah, like Kyler is. Yeah, like Kyler's a little small. And then she goes, no, like the receivers. And it was like right after she said that, the Rondale Moore fade happened. And my wife, she's learned a lot about football and sports in general, but sometimes her observations are the best because it's like just so like plain. And
absolutely.
Like, and it's like that's straight, plain in a good way. Like that's very observant of you. She throws it. She goes, "Why would you throw that ball to the short guy?" Like she's talking about the fade. I was like, I don't know why you would do that. That's a good observation though. He is very short. You usually don't throw those to short guys, but the Cardinals Smurf offensive or wide receiver group has been funny to watch.
Good for you on getting your wife to watch an NFL game with you. We're 6 years in to Casey and Casey and I, and she's never watched an NFL game with me for any stretch of time.
Really?
She hasn't watched a single minute of football with me this year. I tried to tell her something about Patrick Mahomes today, and she looked at me and she's just like, I just gotta tell you, I don't care. And it's good. It's actually like very, very healthy because it allows me to have some real barriers in my life. But
yeah,
it is really funny. So
I never
get
get to step away because even my mom was always just so into it. So like now having someone that just sometimes just doesn't care about the drama of the NFL, it's actually kind of nice.
It's great.
It's nice.
It's very, very nice.
Cold water on you, going like, oh yeah, this is a game.
She's insulated from the pain of what the New Orleans Saints are dealing with right now,
right.
and from all things that come with losing your draft picks and making this sorts of moves.
Pick. Just get another
listen,
pick. That's
where the Niners and the Saints both are. These are two teams that are living on the edge, and that's all we got for tonight. So, guys, thank you very, very much for joining us. Fun little bit of news coming on before the show. If you could, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Would absolutely love that. If you're listening to this podcast, but you're not. So please subscribe to this on the YouTube channel. If you're watching this, please come back on Sunday night to check out our Week 7 recap. We will be back here doing this all over again. If you have not listened to the Week 7 preview, really enjoyed the show today. We had a long conversation about why we've seen some ugly football this year, why defenses have caught up to offenses a little bit. That took up a good majority of our Week 7 preview. So if you guys are interested in that topic at all, I would highly encourage you to go listen to that chat. For now, we'll be back on Sunday night. Until then, appreciate you. Talk to you soon.